that we're going to recite this morning is kinnot number 6, Vav. In the art scroll, it's page 152, Shava Suru. As an introduction to this kinnot, I'd like to mention a very important, almost forgotten halacha. There's a halacha, not a custom, to recite Al Naharos Bavel, a chapter in Tehillim 137, Kuf Lamed Zayin, before one benches. After someone has a meal, he has bread, and he benches Birkat HaMazon beforehand. During the week, you should recite Al Naharos Bavel. One would expect, if they want to find this halacha somewhere in Shulchan Aruch, they'd look in the laws of Birkat HaMazon to see what you're supposed to say before you start, but you won't find it there. The position of this halacha is actually the third halacha in the entire Shulchan Aruch. Way before we even speak about benching, just from the very, very beginning. You wake up in the morning, halacha number 3 is, the Shulchan Aruch writes, every Yirei Shemayim, everyone who fears God, should be disturbed and worried over the fact that the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed and still not rebuilt. And the Mishabura over there brings from the Shla Kadosh that says that a person should say this chapter of Tehillim, Al Naharos Bavel, before benching, as a reminder to mourn over the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. Interesting, we specifically have this reminder when we're full. We just ate and we are satisfied. Because sometimes when we're full and we have a lot of blessing in our lives and things are going well, we forget about what we're really missing. So specifically over there, before we begin, we're supposed to think about the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. I'm not sure why people don't follow this important halacha. It's only 9 psukim, 84 words. It takes less than a half a minute to recite. But for some reason, people aren't as careful. We actually know, many of us probably know 2 of the psukim already by heart. The 5th and the 6th pasuk. There we go, we already know it. There's halacha. Go ahead and say it. The Gemara says in Maseches Gittin, on Daf Nun Zayin Amud Beis, that this parak of Tehillim, David HaMelech had a prophecy. He was already foretold about the Beis HaMikdash being destroyed, the first Beis HaMikdash and the second Beis HaMikdash. And based on that, he composed this chapter of Tehillim. The first 6 psukim are about the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash, and the last 3 psukim are about the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash. Al Naharos Bavel, Sham Yashavnu Gam Bachinu B'Zachrenu Es Tzion. By the rivers of Babylon, specifically the Euphrates River, there we sat and we also wept as we remembered Tzion. Al Aravim B'Socha Talinu Kinorosenu. On the willows, we hung our kinors, either a violin or a harp. We hung it on the tree. The Leviim are speaking over here, and they're saying that they had their kinnor, they had those musical instruments that they had back in the temple that they used to sing every single day, and they hung it up. They put it to rest. Why? Why did they leave it there? Kisham sheilunu shovenu divrei shir, v'sololenu simcha, shiru lanu mishir Tzion. Because there, our captors, Nebuchadnezzar, the people who captured and exiled the Jewish people from Yerushalayim, they said to the Leviim, we want you to sing. Sing the same exact songs that you used to sing in the temple. We want to hear that joyous song about the fact now that we've captured you and you're in our hands. Sing, play the harp, play that same instrument, same words, same tune. We want to hear it. Pasuk Daled Eichna Shira Shir Hashem Al Admas Nechar. The Leviim said, how can we sing? How can we sing in a foreign land, to foreign people? How can we go ahead and sing that song, that holy song that we sang at the Beis HaMikdash? So they hung up their kinors. But it's even more. Rashi in Maseches Kedushin, and Samach Tes Amud Beis 69b, quotes a medrash, which is actually hinted to in our kinnot. The medrash says that the Leviim didn't just hang their kinors, but they did something much different, much more. They actually deliberately mutilated their fingers, making it impossible for them to play the stringed instruments. And that's what we recite in this kinnot Vav, the third stanza, Al Pnei Fras Nuptzu Chasideha. On the surface of the Euphrates, her pious ones were mutilated. This refers to the Levium, who refused to play that song. And one could wonder, there's a lot of discussion out there, what's considered Jewish music? Is it dependent on the singer, on the composer? Do the words matter? What happens if the words are Jewish, the singer isn't? Is there something called the Jewish tune? Is there something called the Jewish instrument and the Jewish beat? Up for discussion. But over here we find something very fascinating. The Levium, the singers were Levium, Kedoshim, holy people. And they were singing the same words that they sang in the Beis HaMikdash. And they used the same exact instrument and the same exact tune. And the Levium didn't just say, we're not playing it. They mutilated their fingers. They said, forget it, there's no chance in the world that we're going to be able to play this song. What's the big deal? It's a song. Okay, so you're playing it for someone that's an evil person, but it's a Jewish song. What's the big deal? So the answer is that the Levium had a very serious sensitivity. Unfortunately, one that many people have lost now with the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. The sensitivity was that a Jewish song isn't about, or not only about, the composer, the singer, the tune, the words, the instrument, the beat, but it's about something much more. It's about where the song brings you. What does the tune take you to? What's the purpose of this tune? Music isn't just supposed to be a passerby, something to fill time. When I'm bored on the bus, I need to listen to something. God forbid to think about anything else. I have to clog my brain. That's not what music is supposed to be. Music is supposed to bring us to a certain feeling, to a certain place. And therefore, the Levium felt that even though, yes, they could play a very kadosh, very holy song right now, they could even maybe ignore the fact that there's a Nebuchadnezzar, the captors over here. But they said that's not what a song is about. A song is about what's the purpose. And that Nebuchadnezzar, his purpose of singing the song was to celebrate the destruction of the Jewish people, the destruction of Yerushalayim, to bring towards idol worship. And therefore, there was no room for it in any shape or form. A sensitivity of Kedusha, of holiness, of the way things are supposed to be. Even if we try to do the right thing and to keep halacha, keep what the Torah wants us to do, we try to be good people, but there's another level of how we want to try to become, and that is super sensitive people, sensitive to what's right, sensitive to what's holy. It doesn't always have to be halachically permitted or prohibited. There's a certain sensitivity that's supposed to have to things. It's supposed to appreciate holiness and strive for it. Unfortunately, we don't have that. With the Beis HaMikdash, we don't always have that on our forefront of our minds. We have to try to integrate that into our lives, to try to think about how we become more sensitive. Again, it's not just about the do's and the don'ts. It's about our feeling. What different things take us to? Where does it bring us to? That we could go ahead and we could be able to connect to Hashem in the greatest way. We begin kinnot Vav, page 152. Shava Suru, many that we're going to recite is kinnot number 10, Yud. On page 174, Eicha Yashva Chavatzelas Hasharon. This kinnot is the kinnot that teaches us how to have those sensitivities. How can we become more cognizant and aware of Kedusha, of holiness, in our own lives today that we don't have the Beis HaMikdash? This kinnot is about the 24 mishmaros in the Beis HaMikdash. The Kohanim and the Leviim were separated into 24 groups and would take turns going to the Beis HaMikdash. Each group would go for a week, 2 times a year, to carry out the services in the Beis HaMikdash. The Gemara tells us in Maseches Tainis that if you look at the psukim about the Karban Tamid, there seems to be a contradiction. On one hand, it seems that it's a Karban of an individual. Each person has to bring the Karban. But on the other hand, it's all written in plural form, Tishmeru, implying that it's a Karban of the Tzibur, of the community. So the Gemara says that everyone would contribute a half a shekel coin, so that the Karban was brought from everyone's money. So everyone, it wasn't just the Kohen that actually brought the Karban. Every person, the Jewish people, were part of the bringing of the Karban every single day. The Gemara says that it wasn't just 24 groups of Kohanim and Leviim, but there were also Yisraelim, the rest of the Jewish people. They were also split up into 24 groups. And some of them actually were in Yerushalayim. They were called the Yisraelim Kavuim. The Kohen would bring the Karban, the Levi would sing, and the Yisrael would stand over the Karban, watching the Karban being brought. And that would be a representation of the rest of the Jewish people that weren't there. The Gemara continues and says that besides these 3 groups, Kohanim bringing the Karban, Yisrael singing, Leviim singing, Yisraelim standing over it, there was another group of the Yisraelim, the rest of the Jewish people, were called the Ma'amados, and wherever they were, down south, up north, they couldn't make it to Yerushalayim. They also were split up into groups, had their turns, and would fast. It was their group's turn. They would fast. They would learn from the Torah, while the other people were doing what was going on in Yerushalayim in the Beis HaMikdash. You have to try to think, let's try to paint a picture a little bit of what life was like. I'm living in Tzfat, and I want to go hang out with my next door neighbor. So I say, come, let's go for a hike to Meron. And my neighbor says, I can't go right now because I'm fasting. What are you fasting? Yeah, I'm one of the Ma'amados today. It's my turn to fast and to lay in the shul, to be my live hookup to what's going on in the Beis HaMikdash. The entire society, wherever you lived in Yerushalayim, in Israel, was surrounding what was going on in the Beis HaMikdash. Everyone knew whose turn it was, everyone knew which family was part of it, everyone knew what was going on. It was constantly on our minds, wherever we were. And Rav Hirsch explains in Parshas Pinchas that these 2 elements of fasting and reading from the Torah is what brought us to focus on the Beis HaMikdash. Learning from the Torah focuses on the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the inner chambers in the Beis HaMikdash, where the luchos were, where the Torah was. And fasting, no one wants to fast. It's very hard. I'm hungry. My physical needs are pushing me, go eat. How much time is left to the fast? And what do I have to do to fight against it? I have to work on my midos. Calm down, don't think about it. I have to work on myself. Working on our midos and learning the Torah are the 2 ways that was represented in the Jewish people on a day-to-day basis to hook up into the Beis HaMikdash and to figure out and to connect to what's going on over there. So it's always on their minds. Kedusha, sensitivity to holiness, what's right, was literally in their everyday life. We don't have that anymore. So Rav Hirsch says that it's true that we don't have the learning of the Torah, we don't have the fasting. He says, but we still have something that connects all of us to the Beis HaMikdash all the time. What's that? Our tefillah. The Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, when they wrote the Siddur, they wrote a common tefillah for everyone. It's in Lashon Rabim, it's in plural. When we go ahead and we daven, we're all davening together. I know I'm davening, and I know you're davening. I know the person in Tzfat is davening, and I know the person down south is davening. We're all saying the same words. We're all in it together. As the Shulchan Aruch writes in Siman Tzadi Daled, when a person davens, okay, here in Eish Torah, it's quite easy. But when a person davens, their mindset is supposed to be, I'm in the Beis HaMikdash. I'm thinking about the Beis HaMikdash. I'm facing the Beis HaMikdash. My heart is towards Beis HaMikdash. I'm in the Beis HaMikdash. That is the kavanah that a person is supposed to have. So when everyone davens every single day, we are literally hooking up to a live stream into the Beis HaMikdash. We're there. Our tefillahs are going there. Our mind is there. Our heart is there. And we are experiencing what they experienced back in the Beis HaMikdash. One of the ways that we could feel the sensitivities and the incredible holiness that we lost with the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash is to focus on our tefillah and not just focusing on I need this, I need that. But when we go into our tefillah, we focus that I'm in the Beis HaMikdash, I'm davening to Hashem, and I'm davening with the rest of the Jewish people. We're all in this together, we're all connected, we're all one. And then we go through our value system. All the different things that we request in our Shemona Esrei are all our values, our direction in life that we're supposed to take, so that we connect. And then after our Shemona Esrei, when we take our step back and forward back into the real world, we're able to be sensitive, and we're able to use the values that we thought about and reflected on in our Shemona Esrei, to be able to go ahead and take us into every single thing that we do, into our music, into our business, into our relationships. It's all with that sensitivity of I just walked out of the Beis HaMikdash. I just walked out of that very, very, very holy place with very, very holy values. Yizrat Hashem, through our tefillahs, we'll be able to experience on some level what they experienced back then, and that our tefillahs itself will be able to go ahead and bring up the Beis HaMikdash Meher V'Yameinu.
Vayikonen Yirmiyahu al Yoshiyahu, page 102 in the Rosenfeld edition, if anybody still has that. Page 182 in the Art Scroll, number 11, kinnot number 11. Yoshiyahu was a king of Israel. He followed two very wicked kings, his grandfather Menashe, who was a Rasha Merusha, a very bad person. Menashe set up idolatry all over the country, confiscated the Sifrei Torah, and provided a very bad example to the people. It is a fact that at the end of his life he did tshuva, but the evil that he had done could not be erased. His son Ammon was a king for all of 2 years. In the book of Divrei Hayamim, book of Chronicles, it says that he continued in the way of his father, namely evil, idolatry. He was assassinated 2 years after he became the king, and Yoshiyahu then became the king. Yoshiyahu was 8 years of age at the time. And he turned to Hashem. He had an interest in coming back. And this was spurred to a great extent by a particular event that's recorded in the book of Chronicles, Divrei Hayamim. It says that a Torah scroll was found in the Beis HaMikdash. Now you might think, well, what's the big deal? A Torah scroll was found, But in those days, remember that Menashe had confiscated all of the Sifrei Torah. There wasn't a Sefer Torah to be found. And the Kohanim, the Kohen Gadol, found this Sefer Torah. And he gave it to one of the scribes, and one of the scribes took it to the king. It was such an important discovery. He took it to the king Yoshiyahu. And they opened it up, and he started reading for the king. And where was it? It was holding by the tochacha. It was holding by the rebuke. the ultimate punishments that Chas v'Shalom would befall the Jewish people if they didn't keep to the right path. Yoshiyahu the king was very much taken by this. And even though he didn't have an example from his father and his grandfather, nevertheless, he sought out the Almighty on his own. And he got rid of as much as he could, all of the idolatry. And he even sent out inspectors to go from the north and down to the south to check in all of the homes, all of the private homes, to make sure that the idolatry was gone, finished with, removed, destroyed. Now, this was quite an amazing thing. And he was successful. Yoshio was successful. 99% successful. But there were jesters, scoffers that still maintained their idolatry, and they were able to hide it from the inspectors. How did they do that? They made an image of their idol on the inside of the door to their home. And when the door would open up, the idol, the image of the idol was split in half, and the inspectors couldn't see anything. They couldn't see anything that looked like an idol. As soon as the inspectors gave their stamp of approval and left, the doors were closed and the idolatry was there. At this time, the king of Egypt, Paro Necher, wanted to wage a war against his enemies, the Assyrians in the north. In order to get to the Assyrians, he had to go through the land of Israel. And he asked permission of Yoshio, the king of Israel. I have no intention, he said, of harming the Jewish people and the land. I want to fulfill the wish of one of your prophets, your prophet Isaiah, Yeshayahu. He prophesied that the nations will fight each other. And I understand from that the Jewish people are not going to be involved. We'll fight each other. We'll take care of each other. I'm reminded, if you don't mind my saying so, that there was a war not too long ago between Iraq and Iran. And the president, the prime minister of Israel then was David, what was his name? Begin. What? Menachem Begin, thank you, Menachem Begin. And he was asked, how does he feel about this war? Iraq versus Iran. And he said, I want to wish both sides much success. Anyway, this was what the Paro Necher said to Yoshio. He sent a message, I have nothing against Israel, and I want to just go through your land, let me go. Let me go through the land and fight against my enemies in the north. Yoshiyahu had learned Chumash. He knew the Bible, he knew the Torah, and he knew that in advance of the Tochacha, in Parshas Bechukosai, the Torah says that if you follow the Torah's Lo Yavor, Lo Yavor Cherev Ba'artzachem. What? The Cherev Lo Yavor Ba'artzachem. No sword will go through your land. If you follow the Torah, you're protected. No sword is going to go through. So Yoshio said, no, I'm not going to let you go through. I have a promise in my Bible that no one can no enemy, no non-Jew, no Gentile army can go through the land of Israel. I'm not going to let you through. So Paro Necher had his mission, and the war against Israel took place. And in this war, Yoshio, the great king, was encircled by the enemy, and he was killed. 300 arrows pierced his heart and his body. and he was dying. And as he was dying, he was mumbling words. The prophet Yirmiyahu happened to be there. And the prophet Yirmiyahu came close to Yoshiyahu to hear what Yoshiyahu was saying. Chas v'shalom, he wasn't blaspheming. Hopefully he wasn't blaspheming. After all, he trusted in the Almighty. He assumed that he was doing the right thing, and here he was being killed. And Yirmiyahu came very close, and he heard Yoshiyahu the king say, Sadik hu Hashem ki pihu marisi. The Almighty is the righteous one. I have rebelled against him. And what was this about? The prophet Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah, the prophet, had told him, don't do it. Don't go back. You can't trust the success of your mission. And Yoshiyahu was not willing to listen. And what happened. Yirmiyahu was so torn by this tragic loss that he wrote a eulogy. He expressed a eulogy. And that we read in Megillas Eicha, the fourth parak, Eicha Yu'am HaZahav, how has the gold become blackened? That is his eulogy for the king Yoshiyahu. The great hope of Israel has been lost. And in the book of Chronicles, it actually says that it was mandated, a halacha, that whenever we have chas v'shalom occasions to bemoan the fate of the Jewish people, we should mention the tragic killing of Yoshiyahu. And indeed, in the kinnot that we're about to read, we have that mentioning. It's quite unusual, focusing on Yoshiyahu. Why? But this is indeed something that was mandated. You have to mention Yoshiyahu when you talk about the Churban or any other very difficult, tragic experience of the Jewish people. But after all is said and done, this is not just a history lesson. But what's the point for us? The point is, first of all, we have to trust the Gedolei Hador. We have to trust the Gedolim, our Torah leaders, because they have a vision they can understand better than we can. And therefore, Yoshiyahu erred. He did not listen to Yirmiyahu. That's something we have to learn. And secondly, we have to learn not to despair, because even as things were so difficult in Eretz Yisrael with the rampant idolatry, Yoshiyahu was able to turn it around and give hope to the remnant of people, to the people that were still living in Eretz Yisrael, the people that were living there. As a matter of fact, we heard several explanations yesterday as to the Aleph base being a common form of the kinos. This kinnot as well begins with Aleph and goes through Taf. There are 22 letters in the Aleph base, and it is explained that the Chazal say that because of the 22 letters of the Aleph base, that represents the 22 years that the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash was delayed because of the merit of Yoshiyahu. Even though he tragically died, the fact that he stood up for Torah, for truth, against idolatry, for Hashem Yisbarach, that brought about a salvation for the Jewish people and stayed the destruction for 22 years. Let's take a look by Konim Yirmiyahu al Yoshiyahu. It's number 11. Eicha.
Kinnot Tet Zayin, number 16, on page 226 in the Art Scroll. Zechor Asher Asat Tsar Bifinim talks about Titus. He destroyed the second Beis Hamikdash. How he just went in there, nothing holding him back. stole the very, very precious utensils, the kalim in the Beis HaMikdash. It goes through the order of events. On page 230, the Paitan is elaborating on a Gemara in Gittin. The Gemara in Gittin and Daf Zayin and Beis says a story during the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash that there were 400 young boys and girls, kids, that were taken hostage, 400, and they were taken on a boat. The kinnot here says it was on 3 boats. And the boys and the girls along the way realized why they were taking them away. And it was clear as day that they were being taken to be used in immoral ways. And first it was the girls, then followed by the boys. They jumped into the water. They died al Kiddush Hashem, not to allow the Romans to do as they please. 400 kids taken hostage, and then they died. Our kinnot adds an additional component to the story. It says, V'shilchum be'eretz Utz b'shalosh sfinot. They sent the children away to the land of Utz on 3 boats, 3 ships. Hashivenu shivu kiva'u b'nivchayam. The children cried out, "Bring us back!" as they sunk into the sea's depths. V'shitfu atzmam yachad and pol bayam. And they all decided together, they came on a united front, that they're going to cast themselves into the sea as one. And here's the line that we don't see in the Gemara. Shir v'tishbachos sharu ka'al yam. They sang song and praises, just like the Jewish people did when they crossed through the Yam Suf, when they left Egypt and they were saved from the Egyptians. They crossed through the Yam Suf and they sang a shira, they sang a song. These children who jumped into the water and died al Kiddush Hashem, they also sang to Hashem, Ki alecha horagdu b'metzulos yam. They were chanting, because of your sake, God, we are killed in the depths of the sea. We're doing this for your sake. This is wild. I understand going through the Yam Suf, you just were saved from the Egyptians who were enslaving you for hundreds of years, and you're ecstatic that you're not being killed, and you sing Shira, you sing a praise to God. But here, when they were going to be raped, and they were going to be trampled upon, and then they decide, okay, we're just going to jump into the water instead, to sing Shira also, to sing a song. How do we make sense of this line in the kinnot? The truth is, we see something very incredible, which is a very, very important part of Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is called a moed. We normally translate moed as a holiday. That's why we don't say tachanun today, because today is a moed. What does that mean? It's a holiday. We're happy, we're excited, we're drinking and dancing, and obviously not. So what in the world does it mean that it's a moed? So the answer is that the word moed doesn't mean a holiday. The word moed comes from the word vad, which means to meet up with, to have a meeting with. On the Yomim Tovim, we have the opportunity to have a very close, intimate meeting with Hashem. Because of whatever happened on that day, whether it was Pesach, Shavuos, there's a special energy, a special Kedusha in the world that we have the opportunity to connect with Hashem, to meet with Hashem in a very, very different way, in a more substantial way, a moed. The same holds true on Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is a moed, not that it's a happy time. Tisha B'Av is a moed because we have the opportunity to meet with Hashem in a very significant way. The Gemara in the Seches Yuma Daf Nundalat Amud Beis tells the story of when the Gentiles walked into the Beis HaMikdash and they saw the Kruvim, the 2 angelic forms that were connected on top of the Aron Kodesh in the Kodesh HaKodashim, and they were embracing one another. They were hugging. And the Ritva asks, how could that be? The Gemara tells us that one of those kruvim represented the Jewish people. The other one represented Hashem. And the Gemara says that when the Jewish people weren't exactly going in the way of Hashem, they actually turned away from one another. And when they were doing the will of Hashem, they faced one another. So how could it be then that when the Beis HaMikdash was being destroyed and the Gentiles were walking into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the holiest of the places in the entire world, how could it be that the Kruvim were hugging one another? It should have been just the opposite. It should have been like punching each other. What's going on over here? So Chaim Shmulevitz in the Sichos Musar explains a very important lesson for all of us, that you never could give rebuke, you never could give criticism in a way that people are going to accept it unless the person knows that you really, really love them. The only way you could give a message of trying to correct someone's ways, trying to show them the proper path, people are too fast to do that. Never really be done. But if it has to be done, the only way you could ever criticize, the only way you could ever try to direct someone is if it's clear as day how much you love them. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu was showing us that He loved us to no end. The two Kruvim were embracing one another, they were hugging because they were in love. Hashem is in love with us. And the only way He was even able to bring about the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash and to stir us up a little bit and or a lot and show us that this isn't what it's supposed to be, the way we're acting is not the way it's supposed to be, it was only by showing us as well how much intensely He loved us. Last night, we spoke about the terrible, terrible massacre in Hebron in 1929, where 67 people were killed, many, many more injured. That happened shortly after Tisha B'Av, on the 16th, the 17th of Av. And just a month and a half later was Rosh Hashanah. And all the people had to leave Hebron. They couldn't stay there anymore. In fact, I highly encourage people to read a little bit about the history of what was going on then. The people in Hebron felt very comfortable with their Arab neighbors. They did business with them. They lived amongst one another. Even when there was rumors that there was going to be a massacre, the friends told them, don't worry about it, we're going to protect you, nothing's going to happen, never here in Hebron. And unfortunately, it was a terrible, terrible, terrible disaster. And a month and a half later was Rosh Hashanah. Everyone, the survivors, were gone. They weren't able to be in their homes anymore. They had to leave Hebron, and they were in Yerushalayim for Rosh Hashanah. And they all davened in a hall here in Jerusalem. And Reb Leib Chasman, the Mashgiach, he went to this boy, Tzal Shikavitsky. And he walked right up to him right before Mariv on Rosh Hashanah night, and he said, I want you to be the Chazan. He said, what? He said, he was known to have a good voice, but he said, I'm not married, I don't have a beard. Those are two of the preferable conditions for someone to be a Chazan in Rosh Hashanah. He said, why are you asking me? And Rabbi Chasman said, you have to be the one, you have to get up there. And he got up there, and it was a very, very difficult and heavy feeling in the room because of what just happened. And they went through the first bracha of Mariv Aravim. And then they started the second bracha, Avas Olam. And Betzal Shikavitsky, this young boy, he gets up to the end where the Chazan is supposed to end off the paragraph, the bracha, and he says, V'avascha, and your love, God, Al Tasir, Mimenu Liolamim, please never take away your love from us. Then he said it again, V'avascha, Al Tasir, Mimenu, please never take away the love that you have for us. Olamin. And he concluded the bracha. And everyone felt The feeling in the room was that, yeah, we just went through a massacre, we just went through such a terrible, terrible experience. Full families killed, destroyed, kicked out of their houses. No one knew what was next. We understand that it was with the love of Hashem. We still believe that Hashem loves us. The Toldos Yaakov Yosef in the beginning of Parshas Ve'era writes that he heard from the Baal Shem Tov that the reason for the ichur, the delay of Mashiach, is because people don't spend enough time saying Ahava Rabbah, the bracha before Shema. Every day, Ahava Rabbah Aftanu, we talk about how Hashem loves us. We really, really feel the love of Hashem, all the incredible brachos that we have in our lives, all the incredibly positive things that Hashem gives us every single moment of everything, of our lives. Do we really feel that love? Do we really feel how much Hashem cares about us? Sometimes when things go wrong and things are difficult, totally takes us over, we get overwhelmed, and we can't even move on. We can't do anything, we can't function. If we'd appreciate how much Hashem loves us, and even with the terrible things that we've experienced this year, that some people experience even on a regular basis, the threats that we're under today, but at the end of the day, we have to remember Ava Rabba Avtanu, Hashem loves us tremendously, cares about us. And even the difficulties and the things that we don't understand, and we're allowed to ask questions and we don't have to get answers, is still coming with a tremendous amount of Ava. And this is what this kinnot is teaching us, that these 400 children who ended up never making it off the boat alive, they went out singing. They went out singing a praise to Hashem, just like the Jewish people did when they left the Yam Suf, because the song was a song of connection. We could feel a connection, we could feel a vad, a moed with Hashem when things are good, and through our simcha and through our happiness we can connect to Hashem. And we could also feel that connection, the love, when it's not so good, but we know in our emunah shlema that Hashem loves us and cares about us. We also connect to Hashem. We cry out to Hashem, Hashem, please save us. We care about you and we know that you care about us. It doesn't really need an introduction. We all are wondering, how do we really feel the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash? How do we really feel that? We never saw it. We don't know really what it is. We can try to learn about it, but how do we feel how bad it really is? This kinnot talks about the different horrors that befell the Jewish people. Women cooked their children. They had no money. They're going to die. What else are they going to eat? What's this doing here? Why do we have to think about this? Why is that important? And how does that help us more in the Beis HaMikdash? The pasuk says in Yirmiyahu, in Perek Beis, pasuk Yates, it's the Haftorah Parshas Maseh, Yasreich ra'aseich u'mishuvalsaich tochichuch. Your evil shall castigate you, reprimand you seriously. Udi'i uri'i ki rav amar azveich as Hashem Elokaich. And you will know and you will see how bad and bitter it is that you left the ways of Hashem. The pasuk is teaching us that when we see and we feel the pain that regular difficulties we have in our lives, and we feel that pain, we think about it for a moment, and then we just channel that feeling towards, that's how bad it is that we left Hashem. That's how bad it is that we don't have a Beis HaMikdash. That is the exact same amount of pain. So when we think about even just recent events, people being killed, being abused, being starved, destruction of families, of homes, of creating the anxiety and the tension that exists in our country right now. All of us think about that for one moment. We say, whoa, that's terrible. And I'm sure many of us cried a lot when we heard the news and we saw things that happened and we've heard testimonies, we've seen pictures. It's terrible, it's sick. It hits us in the core in a terrible place. We're in pain. The pasuk in Yirmiyahu is teaching us that that pain is how much it hurts to be away from Hashem. Hira v'mar, it's bad and bitter. Al azveich es Hashem Elokayich. So the person who arranged the kinos over here was extremely smart, obviously. And he realized that we're not able to feel the pain. We can't cry on something that we never saw or felt or experienced in person. So he put in here, in this kina, read it very carefully. It's terrible. About the terrible, terrible things that happened to the people after the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. You know, you can think about it for a minute and reflect and feel that pain, and then take that pain and say, oh, that's how bad it is. Be distant from Hashem. We'll begin to be able to feel what the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash is really about.
Chaf Aleph, it's on page 248 in the Art Scroll. And we know that Tisha B'Av is considered the national day of mourning for all the calamities that have befallen Jewish people throughout history. So we speak not only about the Churban Bate Mikdash, but also the Crusades, the pogroms, the Holocaust, October 7th. There are some tragedies, however, which have a closer association with the Churban Beis HaMikdash itself. The Gemara says in Maseches Rosh Hashanah, Shkula mitas tzadikim k'sreifas beis Elokeinu. The death of tzadikim is equal in magnitude to the burning of the Beis HaMikdash. As the Gemara makes this direct link between tzadikim leaving the world and the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. There's a particular connection between Kinnot Chaf Aleph, which is going to talk, speaks about the Asara Hurugei Malchus, the 10 Torah giants who were executed by the Romans at the time of during the times of the Mishnayos, and the Streifas Beis Elokeinu, the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. The question is, what's the nature of this link? What does the Gemara mean? What does the Gemara mean when it says Shkula Misas Sadikim K'Streifas Beis Elokeinu? What does that mean? How are they similar? How are they parallel to one another? So, on a metaphysical plane, we know that there was a higher level of Hashra Shechina in the Beis HaMikdash than there was anywhere else. Right? Lots of the dinim associated with the Beis HaMikdash are evidence of this higher level of Hashra Shechina. As a person ascends the Temple Mount and gets closer to the Beis HaMikdash itself and enters the Beis HaMikdash and gets closer to the Kodesh Kadashim, the holiest place in the world, so the dinim get more intense. The people, different levels of Tumah, already a Har HaBayis. As you get closer to the Beis HaMikdash, there are certain people who are excluded. They can't get closer because there's a higher level of Shechina as you get closer to the Beis HaMikdash. As you get in the Beis HaMikdash and as you get closer to the Kodesh Kadashim. There's higher levels of Kedusha in the Beis HaMikdash. And Tzadikim also generate a greater type, a greater form, a greater level of Ashras HaShechina. The amounts of Torah they know, that's the diktuk and mitzvahs that they evidence, the care that they have in Me'adam L'Chaveiro, brings on greater amounts of Kedusha, greater amounts of Hashras HaShechina. And in that sense, a tzaddik is similar to the Beis HaMikdash, in that they both represent greater amounts of Kedusha in the world. The Mesilas Yesharim, in Perek Chavav, when he's talking about the Midah of Kedusha, so he says explicitly, Ish Kazeh, a person like this, a Kadosh person, a big tzaddik, Kadosh person, is Nechshav Kemishkan, Kemikdash, Ukemizbeach. He's like the Mishkan, he's like the Beis HaMikdash, he's like a Mizbeach. He says the Avos, he quotes Chazal, it's a Medrash in Bereishis Rabbah, the Avos are the Merkava for the Shechina. Aram Yitzchak and Yaakov were like the Merkava, the Shechina descended upon them and they represented the Shekhinah in the world. That's what tzaddikim are. The Shekhinah showed on tzaddikim the same way the Shekhinah was showed in the Beis Hamikdash. And he goes on, the Ramchal goes on and says that just like we would bring physical things in the Beis Hamikdash, put them on the Mizbeach, flour, oil, meat, and things would be elevated. So when a tzaddik partakes from aspects of this world, it's like a carbon's being brought. It's a tremendous elevation for those things. All those physical items, when they're used by a tzaddik, it's like the elevation that something experiences when it goes on the Mizbeach. So that's on one level. On one level, tzaddikim are similar to the Beis Hamikdash metaphysically because they both represent a greater level of Hashras HaShekhinah in the world. On a more practical level, though, I think the Gemara also means to say the Beis Hamikdash was a place that inspired tremendous amounts of Yiras Shamayim. There was fear of heaven that was instilled in people who went to visit the Beis Hamikdash. Hashem required us to come to the Beis Hamikdash 3 times a year on the Regalim. It was supposed to be a source of inspiration for the rest of the year. Hashem commanded us to bring Meiser Sheni to the Beis Hamikdash. And it says explicitly, when Hashem tells us to bring Meiser Sheni to the Beis Hamikdash, L'man tilmad liyiras Hashem Elokecha. By coming to Yerushalayim, by coming to the Beis Hamikdash, you learn to have yira of Hashem. There'll be a source of inspiration to prod you further in your avoda, getting closer to Hashem, push you further. And tzaddikim are supposed to serve that role as well. We're supposed to relate to tzaddikim as role models. When we see them, seeing their tzidkos, hearing about the schedules that they maintain, seeing how careful they are with their mitzvos, how careful they are with their learning, how careful they are in all areas of avodas Hashem, it's supposed to inspire us to become bigger people. So tzaddikim are like the Beis Hamikdash in that they, on a practical level, that they bring us to, they make us into bigger people. Visiting the Beis Hamikdash made us into bigger people, and being around tzaddikim and observing them and learning about them is also supposed to make us into bigger people. And in that sense, the Gemara says, Shkula misa tzaddikim g'streifas beis Elokeinu, we lose the hashras hashchina, we lose the inspiration that tzaddikim provide. The Beis Hamikdash represented those two concepts, and so do tzaddikim. So this kinnot Chaf Aleph, which speaks about the Asara Harugei Malchus, these 10 giants who were killed by the Romans during the times of the Mishnayos, has a particular connection to Tisha B'Av and the Churban Batei Mikdash because of the parallel that the Gemara draws between the Misa of Tzaddikim and the loss of the Beis Hamikdash itself. But I wanted to try to convey a powerful message based on a question that a lot of people ask about a seeming contradiction between the Gemara that we quoted, Rosh Hashanah, Yud Ches Amud Beis, and a Medrash in Eicha. Medrash in Eicha, on the 9th pasuk in Eicha, the pasuk is Tumasa B'Shuleha, and in the context of discussing that pasuk, the Medrash in Eicha says, Silukan shel tzadikim chashe yoter michurban beis hamikdash. That when tzadikim leave the world, it's kasha yoser, it's worse than the churban beis hamikdash. As the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah says, it's shkula. Shkula means it's equal to. It's the same thing. And the Medrash in Eicha Rabbah says that it's worse. It's kasha yoser. What does that mean? Is it the same or is it worse? What's the pshat? So Rav Yeshua of Horodna, I saw brought down, comes to explain the difference between the Gemara and the Medrash. He prefaces it by explaining that we know that even though the Beis Hamikdash was physically destroyed, even though that's true, we know that Har Habayis, the Makom HaMikdash, still has Kedusha nowadays. Even though the physical structure is not there, it's still not allowed to go there when a person is Tameh. We know the Shekhinah never departed from the Kotel HaMa'aravi. There's still Kedusha, even though the Beis Hamikdash is physically not present. We know that's the case with regard to the Har Habayis and the Makom HaMikdash. So based on that concept, he explains that if you pay careful attention to the words are different. The Gemara says that the mita of tzaddikim, the death of tzaddikim, is equivalent to Sreifas Beis Elokeinu, is equivalent to the loss of the Beis Hamikdash. The Medrash says the silukan shel tzaddikim. Silukan means the removal, not the misa, the removal of the tzaddikim. That's worse than the Churban Beis Hamikdash. What's the difference between misa and siluk? What's the difference between death and removal? How can a person die and not be removed? What does that mean? So he suggested that when a tzaddik leaves the world, and a tzaddik represented excellence in his learning, in his beidadin l'chaveiro, in his mitzvahs, diktuk in mitzvahs, kirvat Hashem. So when people pick up where the tzaddik left off and they try to mimic his ways and imitate what the tzaddik did and continue to use him as a source of inspiration, so then the kedusha lives on, right? If the tzaddik just dies, but he's not removed because people are emulating his ways, that's shkula. That's equivalent to Sreifas Beis Elokeinu. But if there's a siluk of the tzaddik, not only is he not physically present anymore, but there's a siluk, there's a removal of his energy from the world in the sense that people are not trying to emulate his ways, people are not trying to become bigger people and try to maintain the kedusha that he represented in the world. That's kasha yoser. That's even worse than the Churban Beis HaMikdash. That's worse. I think one of the things to think about over the course of Tisha B'Av and over the course of kinnot Chaf Aleph is trying to think of ways that we can piggyback on the godless of the tzaddikim who we've come in contact with over our lives, we've read about in books, things that we've seen, stories we've heard about the biggest people in previous generations, in our generation, the Gedolim, the words that we cherish and study in our learning, and try to emulate their ways. We want to make sure that we're trying to maintain as much kedusha in the world as possible. Chas v'shalom, whether there be a siluk of these people. It's up to us to determine whether there's a siluk of these people or just a misa of these people. And to the extent that we're able to motivate ourselves to learn better, to be more careful about the feelings of other people, to be more medakdik in halacha, we'll see to it that the tzaddikim who have left us, they weren't nistalik, they were only mace. As we go through this kinnot Chaf Aleph, it's going to talk in detail about 10 of the greatest people we ever had, trying to think about ways that we can do tshuva and emulate their ways and see to it that the kedusha that they represented is able to be maintained, and make sure that we're doing our utmost to maintain as much kedusha as possible in the world.